pastor's wife or husband stealer. Some people come into your life like angels, but not all angels come from heaven. This is the story of how I nearly lost everything: my marriage, my peace, and my faith, not to temptation, but to the very person who was supposed to protect it. My name is Evelyn. I'm 36, and this is how the wife of my pastor tried to take the one thing I held most dear: my husband. I met John when I was just 24, working in a small cafe in Charlotte, North Carolina. He came in every morning at 7:45, ordered the same coffee, and always left a generous tip. It took him 3 weeks to finally ask me out, shy but sincere. And from that first date, I knew this man would change my life. We got married 2 years later. It wasn't a grand wedding, just family, close friends, and a promise to stand by each other through everything. And we did. Through lost jobs, health scares, a miscarriage, and the night his father died in his arms, we stood together. But love isn't always enough, especially when someone begins to whisper into your life, someone you trust. We'd been going to New Harvest Church for about 6 years. It was a small but growing congregation led by Pastor Victor and his wife, First Lady Renee. They were charismatic, warm, always smiling, the kind of couple you'd think had it all figured out. Renee especially, beautiful, graceful, always with a scripture on her lips and advice at the ready. At first, I admired her. She was the kind of woman who seemed to carry wisdom like perfume. You could sense it before she even opened her mouth. She led the women's ministry and was known for her powerful prayer sessions. I attended a few and even cried in her arms once when I was struggling with infertility. So when Renee took an interest in me, in us, I welcomed it. She began inviting John and me over for dinner. She said she saw potential in our marriage, in John's spiritual leadership. She called him anointed. I remember the first night we visited their home. The table was perfectly set, gospel music playing softly in the background, and she greeted John with a hug that lasted a second too long. I brushed it off. Renee was affectionate with everyone. Wasn't she? But that was the beginning. Where are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments, and if you're still with me, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more life lesson stories just like this one. Back to the story. Over the next few months, Renee and John became close. She'd call him to pray during his lunch break. She'd text him scriptures late at night. When I mentioned it, John just smiled and said, "She's our pastor's wife, Evelyn. She's just being kind." I wanted to believe that. I tried to believe that. But something shifted. John began coming home later. He started quoting Renee during arguments, telling me things like, "Renee said I should focus more on my calling," or "Renee thinks we need to be more disciplined with our finances." At one point, I asked him directly, "John, are you confiding in her more than me?" He looked guilty, not because he was having an affair, but because he didn't realize until that moment that maybe, emotionally, he already was. I started withdrawing from church. I couldn't sit through another sermon knowing she was sitting 2 rows ahead, smiling like nothing was wrong. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening. I had just gotten back from my sister's house when I saw John's car wasn't in the driveway. He hadn't mentioned going anywhere. I called him, no answer, called again. Straight to voicemail. Something inside me, maybe a woman's instinct, maybe God, told me to drive to the church. The lights were off except one glowing faintly from the back office. I parked and walked in through the side entrance, and there they were, Renee, my pastor's wife, sitting on the couch beside John, holding his hand, whispering something I couldn't hear. When she saw me, she didn't even flinch. "Evelyn," she said, with that same calm voice she used during Sunday prayer, "God brought your husband to this church for a reason." I lost it. I shouted, cried, accused. John tried to explain, said it wasn't what it looked like, that Renee had been counseling him through a rough patch, that it had gotten too personal, but it wasn't physical. And maybe that was true. Maybe there hadn't been a kiss or a night spent in bed. But emotional betrayal sometimes cuts even deeper. I walked out that night, didn't sleep, didn't eat the next day. I just kept hearing her voice over and over again. God brought your husband to this church for a reason. A week later, John came home from work and found his bags packed. He begged, cried, told me he didn't realize how deep he'd gone until he saw my face that night. And I believe him, but I also believe in consequences. We separated for 3 months. During that time, I went back to therapy, found a smaller church, focused on myself for the first time in years. And slowly, John and I found our way back to each other. Not because of prayers from a pastor's wife, but because we both finally realized what we were about to lose. We cut ties with New Harvest Church, and from what I heard, we weren't the only couple who left. Renee is still there, still smiling, still praying for marriages she has no business touching. So if you're watching this right now and you feel something off, trust your gut. Not every spiritual voice is sent by God, and not every prayer partner is praying for your good. Now let me ask you, do you think I was right to take John back? Or would you have walked away for good? Let's talk in the comments.